Hello, I am Soul. I am a World of Warcraft commentator. I'm a longtime player, and I've been a guild master of my guild that'll soon be, I think, 14 years old. And I also suffer through this very intense social anxiety whenever I'm put into, or even think. Whenever I think about situations where I'm surrounded by strangers, either physically or in a digital space, and put into an activity where there's like a win-lose situation. It's a lot of fun, obviously. I want to talk about social anxiety in MMOs, or I guess the World of Warcraft, because, well, it's the only one that I it's the only one that I play with people. And by social anxiety, I mean mine. I'm not talking broadly. I'm just talking about mine. I own it. You can't have it. Sorry. And this is not going to be a video or stream, because I'm streaming right now. I know, irony, but it's not going to be a video or a piece that goes on to talk about how WoW has made this a problem. And here are my solutions for it. It's not about railing against Mythic Plus, which is a lot of what I'm going to be talking about, but it's not me railing on it and how I think it should change for people like me. I'm doing this because I feel like it would be helpful for people like me. I think it'd be helpful to just share my feelings and share what it is that I struggle with and how I try to deal with it, to let people out there know that they're not alone. Like, I'm not alone, right? So I hope so. So I'll first talk about, like, because I've been playing WoW for like a really, really long time. Why wasn't, was this a problem before? Why is it a problem now? And before, actually before it was a problem too. Like just getting into like dungeons in vanilla. I think, before I joined the guild, basically. So throughout vanilla, I was not part of a guild. And I would just kind of meekly be like, LFG, or someone would be like, hey, I'm looking for 1 DPS, or I'm looking for a warlock, because I used to play warlock. And I'll be like, okay, I'll join. And even then, and I guess there's always a level of it, right? Where you join a group and you're hoping that, okay, I hope that what I bring, that's my mindset. It's like, I hope that what I bring to the table helps this group succeed. Because I'm very empathic. Ugh, that's a bad time to not to pronounce words. I'm very conscious about how groups feel. I read into moods, I read into chat, and, I draw conclusions in my head and try to resist it. But I would still join those groups. I actually never completed like all the dungeons in vanilla when they were current, because for the most part I soloed my way through. I soloed my way to victory. I was a warlock, so even elite quests, I would solo through those too, or I would just not do those elite quests or fight those elite mobs until later when I would outgear it, and then I'd come back and be like, yay, I'm great. And everything would be okay. But in those situations where I got into groups, I'm trying to remember which dungeons I actually ran. I ran Shadowfang Keep, that's memorable. I ran Scarlet Cathedral. I ran Cathedral. I did a couple of temple, Sunken Temple runs. Is that what it's called? And a few at endgame, like maybe 1 or 2 Skullmances, a handful of, I'm like not remembering. I'm not remembering the names of dungeons. The one with the mailbox and that big dude and the damn horse. I'm so terrible. But in those groups, I do remember, times where I would, screw up and people would call me out and I'd feel really bad about it. And it would still be okay, because for the most part I was new. And most everyone was new, and other people were making mistakes too. And I'm like, man, so I would have those sorts of feelings too. But during the period of Burning Crusade, between Burning Crusade and I think Warlords of Draenor, that was like the heyday of dungeon running, where I was just like, all right, dude, let's go, dungeons, justice points, valor, etc., etc., etc. Where I did it a lot, and I felt okay with it because I was lucky enough to join the guild that I'm still in today, and so I would team up with people who were familiar with me, and that familiarity gave a bit of comfort, even if it wasn't like a full guild run. If we had like 3 or 4 people and we had a couple of strangers, aka pugs, I would still have that measure of, okay, I feel good, or I feel okay. But in the back of my mind, and by this time I was playing as a tank now. By then, I was still having that feeling in the back of my mind that I hold this level of responsibility. If I die, everyone dies. Well, maybe everyone dies. And I felt, it's this weird measure of like feeling good and bad at the same time, because it's, oh, it's cool, I have this responsibility, and when things work out, it's great. But when things don't work out, it's like the worst, because it's my fault. I screwed up. And that's something that's, I think, is ever present when playing these sorts of multiplayer games. You're playing co-op, and you want to make sure that your contributions are good, that you didn't wet the group. Not everyone's looking to be like, yeah, dude, I was top deeps, I was top of the meters, I carried the group. Some people are wired like that. They want to have that feeling. That's their role play. Mine was, I guess I could say I wanted that feeling, but it was more like, okay, I just want to make sure that everything stays together and everyone's having a good time. Because even early on, I quickly rose to kind of a leadership role in the guild, even though at the time I didn't run it. But as for like doing these dungeons and I guess the raids were even easier for me because we were in like a large group, and all of us were familiar with each other. We all knew each other. We were on kind of a first name basis, like pretty early on. But I think that on the flip side, having a whole raid with you, whether it's 10 people or 20 people or 40 or whatever, some of the pressure is it's mitigated a little bit because you're in a large group, but at the same time, like depending on your role, it might be critical. And I'll get to that a little bit later with how raid mechanics and dungeon mechanics work in today as well. But even then, like, dying sucks, and usually, and that can sometimes lead to a total party wipe. That really sucks. But I guess going back to why the period between BC and Warlords was kind of the heyday was because there wasn't a whole lot at stake. It was do the dungeon, get the currency, maybe you get the gear, get out, and then do the next dungeon that you can do. Or if, by the time LFG came out, queue up for the next thing. It was, I think during that period, it was much more prevalent because there wasn't anything more than that. It was much more prevalent to be like, all right, you got anyone gonna do their daily heroic? Oh, me, then we go. And everyone in there has a certain level of familiarity because we're all in for like the routine thing. Sometimes we'll get someone like who's brand new, and they wouldn't know. And that's okay if, when people have less experience. Doing those queued dungeons as a tank, I would do it with total strangers, and that seemed okay because the dungeons, for the most part, at that level, they were much easier. They were tuned down, I guess. I'm talking mostly about Wrath of the Lich King. They were kind of tuned down. You can just kind of go in and just rock the place. And then as people got their justice badges or whatever, everyone was gearing up, and that felt okay. So I didn't feel that same level of anxiety. We were there for the end. We were there for the badges, and like that. It was just one level of reward that we were shooting for. Even Cataclysm wasn't so bad. But again, that was mostly because I ran with my guild. We were familiar with each other, and we were learning together. That's where, that's part of where I get my fun in gaming. That's, I learn as I go. I'm not just looking at some guide and following, the guide's instructions. And sometimes it's okay when someone corrects me. Actually, I should normalize that. It should be okay if someone is like, they're in the group and they're like correcting me, like, hey, you should pull this instead or do whatever. That's okay. By the time Warlords came around, though, I guess fatigue. Maybe it's fatigue, or maybe it was just the way that the dungeons were. I'll just talk about it. I felt fatigue running heroics during Warlords. I'm actually not super familiar with all the dungeons in Warlords. I've maybe ran them, during its time. I maybe ran each of them. I've run each of them maybe like 10 times each. That's it. So no more than like 100 or so dungeon runs throughout the entirety of Warlords. And time walking didn't really help. I tend to not do time walking, but not a big deal. But I guess part of why the fatigue sat in was because, well, the garrison's easier. It was just, people went to dungeons for a reason, right? They went in to get gear or badges or whatever. They didn't really that wasn't really a thing in Warlords. You had to get Hexus crystals, and then you had to upgrade them, and they were really bad at the time. And the garrison was just better. And then, so doing the garrison /LFR /raiding, dungeons were already something that you could graduate from pre-Legion, because you just had normal and heroic, and that's it. And it wasn't until like the later part of Warlords where they even introduced mythic level dungeons. Yay, it's gonna be harder. And so things didn't really change for me until, things changed in Warlords, but it wasn't such a dramatic shift until Legion, when they started doing Mythic Plus. When Legion started, I remember this very well. When Legion started, as usual, the guild and I went in blind, and we started doing some dungeons, some of these Mythic Plus dungeons. We're like, okay, we're doing stuff. We got like a 2, we got like a 3, we got a 4, whatever. And then we hit a 7. It was a 7 Black Rick Hold, and it was our first time doing bolstering. Black Rick Hold. And it took us, like an hour? I don't know if they remember. I think it was like an hour and a half to do that first run of Mythic Plus. And that was pretty traumatic. It was a real eye-opener that this is like a different level of dungeon. And then at the end of the dungeon, the key was depleted. I forgot what happened. I think the key, I forgot what happened back in those days. The key was like totally destroyed or something like that, and like you're just done until you clear another dungeon. I believe that's how it was. And I did them. I did them to help the guild, but I was doing it much less frequently than before. What helped to prop it up was the interest of the guild to do them. I'm like, all right, yeah, guys, let's go, let's do it. And I felt that with Mythic Dungeons, there's, as a tank at least, there's a lot more personal responsibility there in terms of you do the wrong pull, that really sucks because people will die. And pre-Mythic Plus, okay, if we die, we get back up. Let's do it again. Let's just make sure we can get through this, okay? With Mythic Plus, there was the timer. So if we didn't hit time, then you got considerably less than what you could have gotten if you had timed it. I'm obviously demonstrating how much I remember about Mythic Plus during the Legion days, which was not super different, but it was different. Oh, and by the way, because my chat is mentioning this, I didn't do challenge modes. I didn't do challenge mode dungeons in MoP and warlords. I paid for them, because some people were interested, but there were far too few people who were interested in that. I think it was part of it was because of the reward. Part of it was because they just, I think that was most of it. Like, they didn't find it to be rewarding enough. And so I guess that was Blizzard's response to it, right? Hey, let's do Mythic Plus. It's going to be harder. It's going to have a lot more to it, but it's going to be more rewarding because it's a form of progression. And looking at it broadly, Mythic Plus is great. It's fantastic. It revitalized a part of the game that before we just graduated from, and then it was raid or die, or PvP or die, or something like that. Or if you didn't do either, well, good luck trying to survive. Run the garrison, run the mission table, or something like that. But yeah, anyway, back to the start of Mythic Plus. I guess the anxiety started to build during that time, and at the same time, it started to challenge our guild. In terms of, hey, here's your win-loss scenario. You gotta get it, or else. And sometimes we would get it, but a lot of the times it would be or else. That was discouraging for some people. But because of the way that I'm wired, I feel like I'm responsible for that. I run the guild. Part of my responsibility is to get runs going, to keep people happy, to get people feeling good about logging on, even if it's not necessarily about the game. It's to hang out with like-minded folks. That's why we're in a guild. And so for me, there's this added pressure of we got to get some wins in. But by the time Battle for Azeroth rolled around, that motivation was like all but in the gutter. I was not motivated to do dungeons. It took almost half the expansion just for me to complete all the dungeons. Just complete them. Like, I didn't run Temple of Sethralus until X many months later, and then all of a sudden, brown dungeon achievement. Okay, maybe it wasn't half the expansion, but it was like at least season 1 going into season 2. I just didn't run Mythic Plus because it just didn't interest me. The social side of WoW, the community, they did a fantastic job of adapting to Mythic Plus, and that's how Raider.io became a thing. It was an answer to groups that just couldn't get together, or groups that were struggling to get together or to complete runs because they were getting the wrong people. So it was Raider.io is a community solution that the community also bitches about, but they made it up, and it is what it is today. I know I've talked about it a good number of times, but I never had a real stake in it. I never bothered paying attention to my own. I never bothered paying attention to anyone else's, because I didn't adapt to that whole social system because I'm in a guild. I'm in a bubble of sorts. The problem, though, is that because we had struggled through Mythic Plus, the guild all but abandoned Mythic Plus. There were a couple people who continued to run it because they wanted to get gear, they wanted to perform well in the raids, which people still logged in for. So that much was okay. And again, I think a lot of it's, just looking inside at my guild, I think a lot of it is because we just couldn't really schedule a time for just 5 people to get together to do these runs, and it was a little bit hard already. Yeah, Mythic Plus was just it was a drag during BFA. I just couldn't do it. I don't think I completed Mythic Plus dungeons on every dungeon in that expansion. Those that I've tried, true, I remember and that spilled over. Because you kind of graduate from heroics and get into raids and do other things to get gear. I didn't even do the daily heroic or anything like that. And I think that is a huge help. I think that's a huge plus to just run to just run like a daily, to just kind of keep your memory fresh. Even if you're just kind of blowing through stuff, it's reminders that, oh, there are things there. And that's something that I know I need to work on, just practicing the dungeons. And and keeping up that familiarity, even if I might not be doing like Mythic Pluses or whatever. But during BFA, I was trying to tell myself, okay, I'll just do low level keys. Maybe I can help people out and make it known that I'm just trying to practice. I'm just trying to build myself up and learn. But I couldn't do that either, because I think by then it was all the anxieties were really starting to settle in. Like I would look at the group finder and I'd be like, okay, I'll start a group and I'll just do like a +5 or something like that, or a +4. And I'm geared, I'm not, I ain't no bitch ass tank or whatever. I have I typically have the gear to run like 13s, 15s or something like that. But I don't have the experience for it, right? But I can definitely do them. But even then, just trying to build myself up, I just couldn't do it. I would hesitate. I'd blink. I'd be like, oh, I could do something else or something like that. Or I could do, or I'll see if anyone here in guild wants to do them, and they wouldn't be interested because they'll be like, oh, you only want to do like a low key? No, I want to do a high key. I'm like, ugh. So even within my own guild, I was starting to feel separated, or I don't know. I just wasn't feeling good, because I was like, okay, I'm mentally I'm here. People want here. I feel bad, and that doesn't feel good. Obviously, it doesn't feel good. So I struggle with that, even now in Shadowlands. So like going out to Shadowlands, and remember, so in BFA I like skipped pretty much everything. I have almost no memory of what like the seasonal affixes were and all that stuff. I barely remember what the original affixes were from like Legion and BFA, and what had come in, what was taken out, what had revamped lately. But in Shadowlands, I felt more pumped. I felt more excited to run these dungeons because, well, the dungeons felt good. After initially running them, I'm like, okay, these are pretty cool. These look like they'll be like challenging and stuff. But then I was running Mythic Plus like pretty regularly. Within the first like week or two, I ran more Mythic Plus in Shadowlands than I did during all of BFA, because they felt good. I was excited about it. But predictably, like things kind of taper off, because once we get to like those tougher dungeons, they're just tougher, and we needed to play at a level that was not casual. It wasn't just like running a quick mythic or a quick heroic. It was, all right, guys, we gotta like eat the foods and think about our cooldowns and stuff like that, because once you get to that certain level, you gotta step up your game. And some people can be like, all right, cool, click, and then they'll turn on their game face and they'll like get right into it. They'll have familiarity with the pulls and how all that stuff works. Not us, or at least not me. I'm not familiar with that. I'm not familiar with that stuff, because I'm just not wired that way. I'm not wired to be like, oh, I better pull up Mythic Dungeon tools and or whatever tools and look at like the pull order. Let me check out the latest video that'll tell me how to pull all these things. That's not how I really wire myself. It's more like, let's take the team, we're gonna figure this out. It's gonna be brutal, but we're gonna have a good time. But that kind of conflicts, obviously, with how Mythic Plus works. It's a me problem, not the game mode. Again, I don't want Mythic Plus to change for me. I'm just sharing how I feel about it, or sharing, how I struggle with it. Maybe what was the most punishing about Shadowlands Season 1, at least, was prideful. because I feel like Prideful put so much emphasis on the planning side of it as opposed to the, hey guys, it's a tough fix, let's power through and overcome the challenges. The challenge happened before the run even began, because the way you guys are all familiar with this. Like, Prideful works on the whole 20%, and you need to time your pulls in such a way that you can take advantage of Prideful, either for tough trash packs or for bosses. And that's, and so because of that, and again, the way that I'm wired, I would need extensive practice in order to figure out, okay, here's how I'm going to do these pulls and these pulls. So that way I know that I'm getting this much percent, for the pride. Then I would use it on this and go from there. So it was kind of like having 5 mythic pluses compressed into one, because you got to do that 20% right. And if you don't, then you risk compromising the run. That sort of cascading, and for me, like that, it's like this cascading pressure up until like the very end. Now I know that the good players can be like, oh well, you can skip the pride, you can just do that and all that. But I just didn't have the experience for it. So a lot of, obviously a lot of my anxiety comes from the lack of experience, and I think that's something that's shared with a lot of people. If they were just more familiar with the dungeons and how they worked, then they would probably do better. But how do they do it? They need to get into groups. How do they get into groups? You need an IO score, or you need to be part of a guild that is okay with practicing and failing and all that. And while I did say that I don't want Mythic Plus to change for me, I know that there are things that I need to change, or I need to do for myself with what I'm given. That's what gaming is, right? Gaming for me is take what's given, use that as a tool or as a vehicle to succeed. And so this is me kind of like doing self-therapy right now as I'm talking about this. I think what I'm gonna have to do is do the daily heroic. It's like going out for a jog, right? Do the daily heroic, and then from that, consider. It's hard to consider because I'm gonna be blowing through stuff. Consider the routes, consider the things that I'm gonna be pulling. Be a little bit more conscious about the abilities that mobs are throwing at me. So that way, when it's really game time, then I at least have the familiarity of what's coming. I have less familiarity of how hard it's going to hit. And then, of course, there's the affix combinations and things like that. But I guess one of the big things that lifts pressure in season 2 of Shadowlands is that it's not prideful. I think that's the biggest boon about it not being prideful. I wouldn't care if they didn't have a seasonal fix. I'd be like, all right, great. I don't have to deal with prideful anymore. Woohoo! And I'd feel okay with that. But that pressure is still there. That hasn't changed. I have this fear of pugging, because now we're at season 2, and there are groups out there, group leaders or whatever, who are going to be looking at folks that have the experience, which I do not have. People will be looking at like their past IO scores or past history or whatever, and using that to decide on how to build groups, and that part sucks. And I feel fortunate that I don't need to deal with it, because I can choose not to deal with it because I have a guild and I could just plan it a different way. But even then, that's hard, because again, as a tank, as a group leader, as a guild leader, I feel that pressure. I feel the anxiety whenever someone in the group says, "Oh, this isn't doing so great," or little sarcastic jabs and ribbon here and there, which is something that we usually do. But this whole empathy side of me sucks it all in too, and I feel that, and it turns, for me, it turns into pressure. That's I gotta show people a good time. I gotta do this. I gotta do that, and it conflicts with my own ideologies as a player, where I'm like, I'm gonna fuck the meta. I'm gonna gear how I want. I'm gonna do this however I like. These are the tactics that I'm going to choose. Screw the dungeon guides, f the videos, video guides, and all that stuff. We're going to figure this out. Because that's like one of those unshakable values that, again, that unfortunately creates this pressure, because people come in, we're all here to play video games, right? And we have this internally, we have this expectation that we want to win, we want to come away with something. Mythic Plus has gotten a lot better in the past couple of expansions. What kind of, I don't know if it traumatized me or something like that, but what affected my behavior is that it felt, before, it felt like a very hard win-loss sort of thing. You got to get this or else. And now that score is playing a factor, you can still lose but win because you at least get score. Although, let me be clear, like, last night was the first time that I got score at all. And let me tell you why. It's because the later part of season 1, during the long wait, we just stopped doing Mythic Plus because people were like, "Oh, I'm burned out. I'm just gonna raid log." That's totally okay, totally fine. People still kept coming for like at least raids and stuff on their alts, but we didn't do Mythic Plus. And so in the first couple weeks of this season, we're all like, "Okay, cool, let's go. What's the first dungeon? Oh, it's a 14 this and this. Shit. Okay, let's go." And it was a disaster. We didn't make time. We didn't get any score at all because we took that long to finish. And so I was like, "All right, let's do a different one. Let's do something easier. Let's do something attainable. We'll do a 10. Boom, no problem." We didn't get score off of that one either because the lack of familiarity. And part of it is, new effects. We got to deal with things. We're trying out different paths and all that stuff. But again, the experience. We didn't look at guides. We didn't look at what to do. We were just kind of winging it. But I felt the pressure too. Still, despite the so-called easy mode, by going over the time by up to the 40% or so, despite not having pride to deal with, I still feel that weight of needing to do well and needing to do the polls right. And it's such a bad feeling whenever I screw it up, or if someone else screws up and I can't make up for it. I still feel that. I still feel that responsibility too. But the run that we did yesterday felt so good. Like I said, we didn't make time, we just made score. But I feel like between the group, we all had a much better, I think mentally we were a bit better synced. It was a necrotic wake, by the way. One of the ones that we did earlier the other week was also in the necrotic wake, and it was bad. But this time I was like, okay, I remember some stuff now. My memory is jogged, and we did better. Part of it was, one of our guys who does do, Mythic Plus more regularly, he was able to help guide us through as well, or at least, give some tips here and there, and otherwise kind of keep me in check to make sure, and eventually, as I keep doing these, I want to, I want to be able to do it without help, just by remembering stuff, or if I, just get this stubbornness out, out of my head and start looking at guides and other things to help ensure optimal runs or whatever. I think the biggest thing is that, you know, as we were doing stuff, we were talking about it, and I guess we just felt, I don't know, we just felt better. There was a better understanding, I guess, that, hey, this is tough. We're gonna get through it. We're going to do our best. If it wasn't for being in the guild, or having one, I would have, I wouldn't have bothered with Mythic Plus at all. Still, because of the way that I deal with being around other people. I don't think anyone likes to be, I don't think anyone likes to feel responsible for ruining a run or wiping a raid. But the familiarity of being in a guild is knowing that when the raid's over or whatever, we're all still together. So there's kind of this modicum of etiquette to keep with having people who are in your guild, and you want to make sure that, again, everyone's having a good time, because you want them, you'll want to treat people the way that they treat you. And in my guild, sometimes that involves like ribbon and talking smack to each other every now and then. But outside of that, we know who we are, because we know each other. We know that, you know, the personality type that we have, yeah, we can be abrasive at some points, but we also want, but more than anything, we want each other to succeed. Not everyone gets that, and so that's why my guild is not for everybody. When it comes to, I forgot where I was going on this. I forgot where I was going on this. Let me read chat. All right, let me read chat for a little bit. All right, Menarg says, when I tank, yes, it doesn't go as well as the other guys in the guild's tanking, but it's a lot of fun for everyone. You have to plan your pulls. If you didn't have Mythic Dungeon tools, you put your group in a disadvantage, and it was a dumb fix MO, although the buff was nice. I completely understand your anxiety. Seeing my log DPS low makes me feel like I'm holding the raid back. When I'm tanking in my other guild, I understand everything that you feel. Prideful was not fun for my favorite tactic. Go in with the face. No, it's much better. Guild runs where people are cool with everything, learning and teaching and learning runs are the only way to go. Did I have fun? Last night? I had fun last night. I was tired. My head was like pounding because I had a headache during the raid, and you know, I'm glad that we're 7 of 10 now. But yeah, I felt good afterwards because, well, one, we at least got like some score. I was like, yay, we actually got score this time, guys. But we were also, you know, we were communicating, we were talking everything through, we were doing our best. We screwed up, you know, we had like 1 or 2 wipes, but we, you know, but more than anything, because again, we know each other, we're not raging out because I want my team to succeed. This is something that's hard to discuss. I mean, I'm feeling like this wasn't a good recording to make. It's hard to discuss because this is just me sharing, yeah, you know, my story, how I feel about it, without wanting things to change. Again, not wanting things to change for me, but yeah, as someone who streams and makes, you know, and does, who's a content creator who runs a guild and all that stuff, I feel that too. I feel it all the time. It's just, how do I deal with it? And being part of a guild helps. Setting expectations for the people who are there also helps. And I think that there are things that I can do, you know, outside of the group to help me kind of stay familiar with things. And I do think that just running the daily heroic is a big part of that, just because it'll help keep my memory jogged, because I have no intention of doing Mythic Plus every day. I don't plan on making it, you know, part of my WoW career, but if it happens, it happens. But I am excited about doing it more, at least in this season, as long as we can get, you know, regularly get folks together. But yeah, it's tough. It's really tough to get over the pressure of wanting everyone to like get along, or you know, managing those expectations. So it's gonna be, it's just tough, and that is the takeaway.